Our upcoming session will discuss the topic or issue of eradicating hunger and poverty, in which we'll have the speakers of Abdul Majid Yahya, the manager of the World Food Program and the representative of the program in the GCC states, and His Excellency Dr. Tariq Al-Berg, the executive director of Dubai Cares, and the representative and Ms. Esther Disha, the chairman of the Let's Talk About the Eradication of Hunger and Poverty. The speakers are.
Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Suhair Al-Qaisi, and I'm privileged today to moderate this panel about eradicating hunger and poverty and how to use technology, knowledge, and awareness in bridging the gap between rich and poor. First, I would like to welcome my guests, and let's do it differently this year. Let's allow our guests to introduce themselves today. And ladies first.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. Thank you, and thanks to the MBRF for inviting us here today. My name is Esther Disho, and I'm the managing director for UPS, Southern Africa and Eastern Africa. UPS is one of the largest logistics providers in the world. And why am I here? So in one of my lifetimes, or one of my career times at UPS, I managed an extensive relationship between UPS, the UPS Foundation, and several humanitarian organizations. So leveraging UPS's skills in logistics and technology to help the nonprofit world and humanitarian organizations better serve their communities. The topic of hunger is one that's close to me, and I've done a TED Talk on it, on what logistics plays, or the role logistics plays in trying to solve the world hunger issue. So I'm looking forward to this session and interacting with my fellow panelists today. Thank you.
Very happy to have you with us. Mr. Al-Berg?
Hi, I'm Tariq Al-Berg. I'm the CEO of Dubai Cares. We're a global philanthropic organization established by His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum in 2007 with a sole aim and sole focus to help eradicate the education problem globally and specifically in developing countries. And I hope that today my intervention will link education with nutrition with hunger and poverty.
Mr. Abdul Majid Yahya, tell us about yourself.
I'm Majid Yahya. I'm the director of the World Food Program in the UAE and representative also to the GCC region. I have been with the program for the last 23 years, working in different regions in Africa and in Asia. The session today we're going to talk about is something very close to my heart, because this is something I have been doing or helping in doing for the last 23 years. Looking forward to have a fruitful discussions.
Very happy to have you all with us. And let's start with the numbers that I have with me now. Over 700 million people, which is about 10% of the population on planet Earth, they live in extreme poverty. Is hunger on the rise again? And my first question to you, Ustad Abdul Majid.
Well, unfortunately, despite the progress or the decline that happened during the last decades, what we have seen, particularly last year, hunger is on the rise again. Last year only, we have now additional 10 million people, and the total figure is reaching now 821 million people around the world who are hungry or suffer some sort of food insecurity. They go to bed every night with empty stomach, or they don't know where their next meal is coming from. So the number is rising, and there are big threats to actually achieving the zero hunger.
I'll go back to the threats, but I want to ask Dr. Tariq, why is it on the rise again? Where is the issue?
Well, we're not hunger-oriented organization, but our job and our work, and when it comes to education, it's always related to nutrition, to food, and also hunger.
So is it lack of education or lack of awareness when we see the hunger is on the rise?
Well,
at the same time, and we see a lot of efforts to raise awareness.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at any issue in the world, the main issue will always be education. If you're talking about health, if there's education, there will be less health issues. If you're talking about hunger, education will lead to jobs. There will be less people not having any income. And education plays that big role. What I see, if there's a rise in hunger globally, definitely education is a big component of it. Funding is a big component of it. A lot of people see, why should we fund another country's hunger? It's not our issue. Let the UN and other countries and the big countries look into it. But they don't realize that whatever issue there is in a country, it can give a domino effect to neighboring countries and other countries, and it may attract some radical groups or armed groups to recruit them. And as we know what's happening in the Horn of Africa. So these issues, we have to take care of them. And if they are rising, we have to look into education, in my opinion, education and funding as the first resource to this.
Ms. Esther, what do you have to say about the numbers recently, why it's increasing when we talk about hunger and poverty?
So I think when you look at the numbers last year, based on the stats that were circulated last year, so about 120 million people face crisis-level hunger. That means out of the 800 million that Majid talked about earlier, out of the 800, 120 of those folks went to bed probably with nothing and probably have gone over several days with no food or no water. When you look at those numbers and what the contributing factor is, or the countries that contribute to that 120,000, it's Nigeria, it's Somalia, it's Yemen, it's South Sudan. And what do you find? What's the common link in there? It's a crisis, right?
Yes.
So I don't think it's news to anybody if you're keeping up with what's going on, and you know that, of course, there has been crises going on in those countries. And of course, with that, it makes it more difficult for organizations such as the World Food Program to get aid in. It makes it more difficult for any organizations that might want to come and do good in those organizations to function. Yes. We are aware that there was a time when all UN agencies and all aid agencies were kicked out of Yemen. So that only just exacerbates the issue. So in my opinion, the rise is, yes, there's a question of education. Yes, there's a question of access.
Yes.
But then there is a direct correlation to wars and unrest that you see going on.
Yes. Can we say that conflict is the major drive of hunger, or there are also other major drives that you can talk about?
Me?
Yes. I can ask two questions, the same person.
So I look at it from a very different angle. And my angle is that we actually have food. And it's more a question of access and making sure that the food gets to the people that actually need it.
Yes.
So even if I was to tie it back to my answer or to the comment I just made before right now, the aid agencies that want to deliver food or distribute food to these areas, they have the food, or they have access to it. But it's more about, or access to food to be able to get to those places. It's accessibility to those places that makes it more difficult.
Yes.
Then I'll take it to another angle. It's also the accessibility of farmers being able to get it out to the right markets.
Yes.
We do realize that when you go out in to most farming areas where you've got subsistent farmers, they do not have a proper supply chain or the ability to get produce from their farms out to the markets and sell those foods in markets that would give them the better, good pricing. Then you end up having lots of food waste in the farm. But so for me, it's more about there is food. It's about the access, and it's about the knowledge. The education comes in as well.
Mr. Abdul Majid, when we talk about access, of course, because you work on the ground, And as a person, when I went to Iraq back in 2017, 2016, and I worked closely with WFP, I saw how much it is difficult to deliver under war situation. Now, tell us more about the access to the areas where hunger is rising and how difficult for the team in WFP to go there and serve.
Yeah, but let me start also from where Esther ended, because she also brings important points there. First, the world has come together in 2015 and came with the Sustainable Development Goals to achieve by 2030. Now, the zero hunger is one of them,
Yes.
and it's actually the goal number 2. And we started by showing some progress in the Millennium Development Goals, but then in the last year we have seen
May I ask you,
rise again.
when did you start this initiative, Zero Hunger?
In 2015. This is
Okay.
when the world came together with them on the all SDGs together.
Okay.
So now, today, as we said, 821 million people. There is the issue of also the population growth in the world. By 250 or 2050, the world population is expected to reach $9 billion. If we, with the same rate of hunger moving now, then we expect to have 2 billion people. Now, one of there are 3 threats to achieving that goal.
Okay.
One of which is conflict,
Yes.
okay? That preventing those population from accessing food, okay? Another issue to do with economic marginalization, preventing their economic access to food. The third one, which we are seeing increasingly, is climate change, which is also preventing those who are working on the agriculture, on producing food, from producing what they need. Now there are two issues, or there is one important fact here, which is in the developing world, 80% of the food is produced by smallholders farmers.
Yes.
Ironically, those smallholder farmers are the people who are most suffering from food insecurity. Why? Because, as Esther mentioned, the access to markets, but also storage facilities that are not available to them. So just wanted to add this. It's like very conflict and complicated process in there. The people who are feeding or producing 80% of the food, they are the most food insecure at the same time. They are the most who are suffering from the climate shocks and climate change and droughts and floods and so on. Now, when it comes to your point about the access.
The access, yes, because she was talking about how difficult when conflicts are there, or when there is a crisis in the area, to even when you want to help to eradicate hunger in these areas, there is an issue of entering the areas and reaching out to people there when there is conflict. This thing I relate to because I was there and saw your work closely. That's why I want you to explain to our audience now how difficult when there is war or conflict to enter the area after educating people and getting the funds, how difficult for you to deliver.
Well, of course, it's not easy, but this is where we work. This is where we deliver. This is where actually 2/3 of the population that we serve are in conflict-affected areas, are in war zones. So, and the world has come since World War II to developing the humanitarian law, the rules of engagement. How do we operate when there is a situation of war, that there is a humanitarian negotiations and so on. And this is what we do actually to access that. This is not an easy process. This is not a safe process at the same time.
Yes, exactly.
But that's what the world has entrusted us to do. And we have lost lives, we were kidnapped, or so this is a price that we have to do, and we are willingly doing that.
Dr. Tariq, when we talk about zero hunger and such initiatives, how important is education to let people know about such kind of effort or initiatives?
Well, as Majid mentioned about the main reasons on why it's rising and the issue of hunger, you come to education as one of the pillars for access to food.
Yes.
And a lot of people don't see there's a huge link between education and hunger. Now hunger is also related to a large extent to poverty. And as Majid mentioned, maybe he has mentioned the economic factors.
Yes.
But let's not forget that if you are poor, you are poor. And if you are not earning enough money to survive, you will be hungry, end of the day. And what we do in access and linking this education component with poverty and hunger is you have to have access points. One of them is through the WFP model. And by the way, in my opinion, it's not because you're here, Majid, I've said it in UNESCO last week in Paris. The WFP is, in my opinion, the most properly organized UN agency when it comes to access and reach to the beneficiaries.
And it's the biggest in the world also.
And it's a very complex and complicated system, and people have to see how the WFP works, and I agree with you also when you kept on mentioning about you have seen it in reality. There's a WFP model. And then there's the private sector. We have to involve the farmers. We have to involve the companies. They have to be united into having a holistic approach, mainstreaming efforts coming into the equation of providing food. But then let's not forget, if we provide food in schools, most of, if not 75, maybe 90% of the schools in Africa alone, regardless of the other continents, the government schools, they don't provide free meals. They have to have donors. They have to have people like the WFP. The WFP will not go from their own pockets and do a school feeding program. They have to have a donor. They have to have a country. They have to have a foundation behind them.
And by the way, Dr. Tariq, not all the donors understand the work closely. That's why I link education with initiatives like that, because sometimes you go to potential donors and he asks and he has no idea how hard to deliver and how hard to bring such big amounts on the field and deliver them to people who are in need.
True.
So how important to tell the donors what's going on and educate them to get the best from them.
I just want to mention one thing. Sick children means no attendance to school.
Yes.
Hungry children means they will not learn. Exactly how human beings are. We go to our work. If we get sick, we don't go to work. If we are hungry and it's 3 or 4 p.m., you will not be able to attend that meeting or understand what is being said in that meeting. The same thing is with a child. Yes. Feeding the child is very important for the child to learn. If you do not feed the child at school, you're not giving him quality education. So now we come back to another issue, which is quality education. Access is one, but quality is another. How do you want this kid in school to learn and he's not being fed? Access to education, we have a global figure, which is 282 million children are out of school. But then you have 416 million children who are in schools, but they're not learning anything. One of the biggest issues is hunger. That's why we have to work closely with these actors to deliver the food to
Exactly.
the children.
1 child out of 5 children lives in poverty, lives in extreme poverty, and they don't know when they get their next meal. Ms. Esther, tell us more about the situation when we talk about children and poverty, children and hunger.
So I'd just like to add on to what was said earlier. And how do you change or how do you get donors to understand?
Okay.
So in my role at UPS, I used to manage the private-public partnership, so with several organizations. And the traditional model, when you go back, has always been looking for cash.
Yes.
Right? So organizations would come back and ask for cash donations. The likes of UN agencies, and not even that, even the mindset of the private sector is, Anybody that comes knocking on my door is looking for money. They're looking for me to write a check. But it goes beyond that. You need to understand when you are going out to talk to organizations, what value can they bring to you, right? So in our case, it's logistics. So we understand logistics. We're a 100-year-old company. We've been in the space for a while. We understand everything from trucks to warehouses to customs to everything. So how do we leverage that capability or those skills in the partnership without or in addition to writing a check? So the way we look at it is if we have a person embedded in an organization for a year or for 6 months or for 3 months or whatever the period is, the amount of value they bring into that organization is far more than a check. Okay, some people might argue that they'd rather have the check, but the way we see it from a sustainability or from a sustainable model, our skill sets should be able to bring more value to an organization. Now, back to your question. What was it about? The children again. Children and poverty. So children and poverty. You know, we've touched on the food. We've touched on what the impact will be. I think for me, it goes above and beyond that. So one of the partnerships we manage is with the Gavi Alliance. So Gavi Alliance is the Global Alliance for Vaccine and Immunizations. So on one side, we're working on the latest technologies, which is drones, to provide vaccines to the children in various countries. Then, so they get their first suite of vaccinations. Then that poor child doesn't get food to get them to the age of 5. So all the work we've done in the front end to ensure that they got their vaccinations, is dead in the water, no pun intended. So for me, it's greater than just a meal. You know, there's multiple touch points that we need to look at. And yes, there are folks that are looking at it in different areas just to ensure that we can be able to tackle different areas that impact those children as they're growing up. But to me, you have to look at it the full suite. So making sure that they get vaccines, making sure that they're able to get to the age of 5, right? Making sure that when they get to the age of 5, they're healthy, because we know what happens with malnourished children. We've just heard about it, right? The impact, the hungry kids that cannot be able to wake up, can't be able to think, the adverse effect on the entire community is extreme. And for us, I think it's just, we cannot afford not to address that vulnerable age of children between 0 and 5.
Mr. Abdul Majid, we were talking about donors and the value of feeding people. I want to ask about the reaction to your initiative, Zero Hunger. How was the reaction since 2015 globally? Was it satisfying? The reaction globally to your initiative, Zero Hunger. How was the support to this initiative?
Well, in the case of the World Food Programme, and as also Esther mentioned at the beginning, that there are today 121 million people who are severely food insecure population out of the 820 million. These 121 million are in either conflict areas, armed areas, and war and sort of, okay? Out of those, we are able to reach 90 million. So, and this because of the generosity of our donors. Yes, we would, to reach the 121 million people every year, we require a $9 billion. We are able to secure, so far, $7 billion. Okay, or 7 point. So there is
it's very good, we can consider it a very good reaction, and the result is so far.
Absolutely. I mean, there is a generous donors community that support us and to support those who are actually in need. But what we are doing today is saving lives. of people in man-made disaster or natural-made disasters or natural disasters. This is one part and one important part of our job, saving lives. But to go on and achieve the zero hunger by 2030, ensuring that everybody has access, economical access to nutritious food at all times, then we need to change lives. And that's why we save lives, and we are changing lives as well, in enabling people to help themselves, stand back again on their food.
Great. Dr. Tariq, do you want to say something, Ms.
No,
Esther?
no.
I do.
Esther?
Actually, I
okay,
do.
please.
Don't hold me back. So the work WFP does, in most cases, is going to be in adverse areas. It's going to be in the hard-to-reach areas. It's going to be in the folks, the marginalized communities. It's going to be in your crisis areas. Now, to me, when I think about it, there's the second tier. It's a second tier of people who have, we talked about the farmers. There's a second tier. Those folks have food. They have access to some sort of food. You may be a potato farmer, so that means all you have is potatoes, and maybe you've figured out how to add cabbage into your farm, or maybe you've added corn into your farm. But they have something. So it's a question of how do we take what they have to give them access to better nutrition, right? So that every day when they go to bed, they're not just eating cornmeal, or they're not just having porridge. How do we add fortified grains, or how do we make what they eat more nutritious, so that even their children, in the morning, they might wake up and have something, porridge. Porridge is just cornmeal and water, or cornmeal in the best case, milk, right? How do we empower them to be able to get a balanced diet, for better, lack of a better phrase to put out there? How do we empower them to be able to make money so that when that person gets sick, they're not bedridden because they don't have access to healthcare? How do we empower them to make sure that if it's in a country where education, primary education is not free, they have money to take their kids to school? And that's where the economic empowerment comes in. That's where, for me, that's what, the way I look at it, that's how you get, the access to markets comes into play. Meaning that we have to be able to create a whole ecosystem for these folks to be contributors into the economy. So they're not just relying on the aid that WFP can provide, or the likes of WFP can provide.
Dr. Tariq, do you have anything to add on?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. How important now is the education if we want to bring more donors? What's your activities when we talk about donors in order to support any initiative about zero hunger?
Innovation. You show them innovation, you show them something that has not been done before. What the WFP, if I may, Majid, we've worked together many, many years. What the WFP is suffering, that they're doing the same model, which they have to, in terms of feeding the world. Part of it are children. But if you take what they're doing and you put them into products, so they're doing exactly the same thing, you're just repackaging the approach. And you're having innovation into it, and I'll tap into what innovation we have done, and the WFP was with us into that program, and it has been a flagship globally, and a lot of organizations are following.
I'm so eager
pattern.
to know.
Yeah, I'll let you know. So if you create that package, this is what donor wants. You want to buy something, you keep on buying the same product, and then you get bored of it and you go to another product. But if that same brand packages differently, the psychological brain, the subconscious mind of yours will say, go back, they're doing a better job. So it's packaging. And I'll tell you what we have done. Look, when we're talking about feeding, we have to understand that feeding is one big silo. But there's also water sanitation and hygiene, wash, that's another issue. And there's also the health issue. That's the biggest problem. And a lot of organizations and agencies are working to eradicate these issues. But what if you combine these together? You integrate these three components, specifically feeding, health, and wash. If you mix them together, you will have a better impact. And that's not the package I'm talking about. I'll come to it in a bit.
Okay.
So if you will get a better impact to societies, to communities, to people, to children, and whatever thematic you're working on, I'm working on education, she's working on logistics, he's working on feeding, it will make more sense to combine this. And these efforts should partner with the other ones. So what we did, we had a program a long time ago doing homegrown school feeding. And I'll tell you what's the difference between school feeding and homegrown school feeding. And we started that in Bangladesh. And then a few years later, we realized that you cannot only feed the children, because as much as you feed them, there are parasites and worms in their intestines who are actually feeding upon the food that you feed the children. So what you have to do, you have to kill these parasites and worms. And to kill them, you have to deworm children. So one, I have to do school feeding, Dubai Cares, because education. But to ensure that we're feeding the child and we're not feeding the worm, then we have to do a deworming program that will eliminate the parasites and the worms. But till when I will keep on deworming them? I will keep on spending money, investing in deworming pills to deworm them? No. What you do is you change the mindset and you introduce WASH. And you tell them, in 3-4 years, if I will do an advocacy, a campaign with the government, you have to work with the government always. And if you have the WASH component, teaching children, parents, communities, teachers, and building the capacity of the ministries, the importance of washing hands, what you have done, you have hygienically fit children, parents, communities, teachers, that you don't have to deworm anymore because they will wash their hands before they eat every single time. So that's what we did in Ethiopia. We did a school feeding program, a homegrown school feeding, and I'll tap into what we're doing there. And we integrated this with deworming, and we integrated this with WASH in schools, and we had a powerful program. We invested more money to have a research into that program that has told us, we took sample sizes, half of the schools deworming and school feeding, and the other sample was both plus the WASH. And we wanted to measure to see, does WASH actually makes a difference in terms of attendance? Does WASH decrease diseases? Does WASH help integrate with school feeding? And the answer is yes, the research is out. And what we did in terms of innovation, and this might be interesting, and I hope there would be some donors sitting here to hear this, we didn't want to do the normal WFP model, import food, store it, send it to school. We didn't want to do that. So we were a bit innovative. We were a lot innovative, Majid, together with the WFP. And what we did, we used the local farmers. Aster was talking about farmers. The land in Ethiopia is a fertile land. You have a lot of farmers there. So why don't we link the Ministry of Education, put their specification on the food they require, whether it's corn, whether it's a banana, whether it's an apple, whether it's rice, and ask the farmers to seed these, and when harvest comes, we take the crops and we take it and we also invest in centralized kitchen where mothers are the caterers, and they take the food, they fortify it with vitamins, with minerals, and then we take it to school. And how we do all of this? We have that small cyclist which takes the food from the farm to the warehouse, from the warehouse to the centralized kitchen, and then it goes to the school.
Amazing.
That's the innovation. You're building an economy, you're solving a solution, you're helping the farmers, and you're educating children.
I want everyone to put their hands together for innovation. I'm really proud of Dubai Cares, and I want Mr. Abdul Majid to add something about this innovative ideas.
Talk about the World Food Program, and that today we are the world's largest humanitarian organization wasn't possible without changing and innovating all the way.
Tell us more. How do you innovate in WFP?
There were two things that we discovered from early days that are needed in the way we do our job: logistics and telecommunication technology. From those early days, we need to reach the unreachables. We have to be able to reach whoever in everywhere, remote areas, disaster hit areas, war zones, whatever. We have to have the best logistics. And we do have the best logistics. Better than UPS, I don't know.
She will answer in a bit.
But we are able to use whatever logistics means to deliver what we need. Telecommunication technology is also very important to us. And we have grown into that to become today the logistics hand of the UN system and the telecommunication hand of the UN system as well. Now, in the last 20 years, we have also evolved, starting using the technology to help us achieve our work more efficiently and effectively as well. The use of, today we are the world #1 humanitarian organization user of blockchain technology in delivering humanitarian assistance. We are using drones in 30, 40 countries today to assess situations. Where are these populations? What is the impact of, particularly when there is natural disaster, how to reach them? We are using also technology to acquire data, the real-time data on the vulnerability mapping and assessment. So, and this is where also we are able to reach more at a lower cost as well. So
Great.
Innovation is very important, and it's actually the vehicle that it will take us hopefully to the 2030.
Hopefully. Ms. Esther, you have something to say about innovation?
I think we've seen changes, and not to be the capitalistic American sitting up here, there is opportunity, right? So there's opportunity for people to actually make money out of it. And there's folks that have understood that they can actually create they can use innovation to utilize the tools to address the world hunger issue and also make money. And so, you know, we always shy away from there's opportunity to make money because we're dealing with a world crisis and there are people in need. But at the end of the day, we're also talking about sustainable solutions, right? So if we're saying on one hand that there is food, and we're saying on the other hand that we're trying to help people make money or become economically viable, they will only become economically viable if you create a marketplace for them.
Exactly.
Which then means on the other end of the market, there's got to be a person that wants to buy the food. We know there are people that want to buy food. And I'll just use an example. So I'm originally from Kenya. I was born in Kenya. And agriculture for us is a backbone of our community. We've got farmers that just grow more than they can have. And there's an innovation, or there's a company that has come up, and it's commercial. It's a commercial engagement. They created a portal where they go out and talk to farmers. They're able to bring in farmers on board. So they vet the farmers and they bring them on board. And then they create a marketplace. So vendors in the urban centers who would typically not have access to fresh produce or at a different model. So traditionally, people would just bring in food to a local central market in Nairobi, the capital city, and in Mombasa, in this, the main urban areas, and then you pretty much haggle to buy the product. Now, the vendors have access to better types of products because farmers have been vetted, yes. They've gotten the right type of education on how to farm better and to ensure that in some cases it's organic. So it's not necessarily even just, using fertilizers or whatever, it's organic. And they vet the farmers, they vet the produce, they vet the vendor, and then you're able to go in and buy your supplies. Mm-hmm. So in all that, when you look at that entire value chain, there's an opportunity for the farmer, there's an opportunity for a transporter, because you do need to get the produce from the farms into the markets. There's an opportunity for a retailer somewhere in the city to get fresh produce at a lower cost. They have access to the costs of the food. And then when you look at the recipient at the end, you can choose what you want, right? And it's good product, it's accessible, and I don't want to say it's much cheaper, but it's significantly cheaper.
Great. Yeah. What I like about this discussion that my panelists all have two things. You have passion and you have innovative minds.
And we have hair.
innovative minds. I said. So, as a person, I love passion and I love innovation. So I'm very happy to talk about that. Now, I think we have a few minutes before. I would love to take questions from the audience, if you don't mind, but...
Can I just take 20 seconds
yes,
on
of
innovation?
Course, of course.
Innovation also helps you cut cost. That's very important to know. And I'll give you the same example, not to go far. What we did with the WFP in Ethiopia, we invested $3 million for a 4-year program to put all these 3 components together. And usually when you save money on $3 million on a big program like this, you come, and from the beginning you agree with the WFP, how many children are we going to feed for the next 4 years? It's the same children. It's not, I'm going to feed this child today and I'm going to feed that child. No, you selected them and it's a continuous process.
Yes.
And what has happened, and when you save money, you may save 10% or 15%, but from the $3 million, we were able to save $500,000 because of this innovation.
Amazing.
And the WFP came to us and said, we have $500,000 savings from a $3 million. That's a big percentage.
Of course.
Shall we refund this money back to you? And we said, no. I said, can you do something about it? They said, yes. We can, with the same children that we fed, we can have a cycle of 1 more year. That's 365 days of feeding. So we saved 500,000. We didn't take it back. We put it. So cutting costs is very important, and the innovation plays a big role into that.
Yes. I think the last question is going to be about how to use technology, knowledge, awareness, before we take questions from the audience. And start with you, Mr. Abdul Majid. Tell us about how to use technology and the importance of technology, knowledge, and awareness in bridging the gap between rich and poor.
I mean, I mentioned a few of them, just like how in WFP we employ the technology in delivering our humanitarian assistance.
Okay.
One of which now we have evolved from in somewhere where the market allows, we have changed from providing food to providing cards where they can go and we put an amount there and they go and buy what they want. For this, we have even moved on and we are using blockchain. So in Jordan today, there are 110,000 Syrian refugees in both camps.
Yes.
They receive their monthly assistance from WFP through blockchain. This is amounts to like 66 million for the past 15 months. Now, the most important thing in using the blockchain, apart from ensuring the high standards of accountability, is that also I do not use the intermediary banks, where to deliver this 66 million, we have saved 800,000 that used to be paid as bank fees and transactional costs.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a big saving, and this 800,000 can enable us, of course, feed more people or for a longer duration. Using the mobile application is very important also.
Yes.
And have helped us. We connect small farmers through a mobile application in Africa to tell them where are the nearest markets. To go that, so that because access to market is an issue to smallholders farmers. Okay, we have initiated what we call Share the Meal, which is a mobile application where anybody can contribute a meal.
Yes.
So far, we have raised, I think, 66 million meals out of that in the last 4 years. So this is where innovation is helping us, reaching people more effectively and efficient and cost efficient, but also putting us at the level of the accountability is at very high standard set.
Yes. Ms. Esther, anything to add about the importance of technology, awareness, knowledge?
Oh, just following up to the use of the mobile technology, I think it's also the use of the data, right?
Yes.
So the UN, WFP, UPS, we've got access to a lot of data that allows us to be able to make decisions. And it's a question of what you do with that information. So the data analytics behind it. So ensuring that you have people that can be able to take that information, break it down, and make decisions. So help come up with decisions on where to place, if it's feeding centers, decisions on where to place your markets, decisions on where are the farmers, decisions on, whatever, but utilizing the data to be able to help make more informed decisions about how to respond better to the poverty and to the hunger issue.
I'm going to build
Dr.
on
Tariq,
what
the
Esther
innovator,
mentioned.
any addition?
Yeah, I'll build on what Esther mentioned. We have to use technology to extract data, as she mentioned exactly. We have, and if we're going to link it with food and hunger now, we have to measure from these analytics how much food we consume as human beings.
Yes.
And how much of this food is going on wastage. Without technology, we will not be able to measure that. We will not be able to get that number. And once we get that number, and on whatever I have mentioned in terms of cutting cost and investment and innovation, you can actually save money, you can actually distribute food. There will not be any wastage. Keep in mind, wastage of food, meaning other children and other people not being fed. So the more you save there, the more people you will feed. That is on one. And you mentioned about the divide between the rich and poor.
Yes.
I'll be very quick on this one, and I'm removing my hat completely as Dubai Cares. Look, we have to define what is poverty and what is poor and rich. We have to define it because a lot of people may think poverty and poor is the same thing, and they're completely two different things. Poverty is if you earn less than $2 a day.
Yes, 1.9.
Yeah, 1.9, less than $2 a day. Poor is no, your head is above the surface, you can breathe, but you're poor.
Yes.
And that is from $2 to $10 a day.
Yeah.
And then from poor, you move to low income, which means you're fine. And then you go to the middle class. And this is what China did. At the start of the millennium, China decided that they don't want to have poverty and they want to have more middle class. And in 10 years after the start of the millennium, they had a program. And what happened in 10 years? They lifted 203 million people. 203 million people. That's a huge number.
Yes, yes.
That's half of the population of the Arabs, basically.
I don't want to interrupt you. It is a huge number.
They lifted 203 million people, Chinese people, from low income to middle class.
Oh my God.
And
it's a huge number.
At the same decade, they lifted 700 million people from poverty to low income.
Oh my God.
This is the model we have to do.
700
We have to
million
learn.
people.
Yeah, they did something good there.
Do we have time to know what's the program
Please.
there? Please tell us.
Okay. Pardon?
The program in China, what is it?
I don't know it. I don't know it. No, because it's not related to education.
We need another panel then.
But you see, when you plan things, you can make it happen.
Okay. We have about 6 minutes or 7 minutes for the audience. Anyone who has a question? Yes, please. After him. Please, short and brief.
اوكي تمام هتكلم عربي.
I'm going to speak in Arabic. My name is Ahmed Farou. I'm a lawyer. The point of food and hunger, as you've been saying, the idea is not to provide the individual or the children with a meal in their school. If we're talking about poverty and hunger in Africa, well, Africa is the biggest continent that has rivers, has fertile land, it has all of the agriculture elements. Yet we have this saying we say in Egypt, don't give me a fish, but teach me how to fish. So we need to develop the culture, the mind, how to farm, how to provide their own food so that they won't be subjected to hunger. So could you please specify the question who you direct it to? Yes, you can. So what are the plans by which we can develop the mindset develop the culture in order to produce food and eradicate poverty, but not through providing them with actual food, but help them get their own food or make their own food.
Keep your headsets on, please. لا خلك راح أكلمك بالعربي. Okay? أنت سؤالك هل إحنا على الكرة الأرضية
So your question is, are we on planet Earth? Can we solve the hunger crisis with the resources that we have? Yes. Let's take Sudan as an example. Farms available in Sudan and the rivers in Sudan. You mentioned the rivers. So if they are going to work on 100% of the fertile land that they have, 100% land utilization of their farms and land, only Sudan could feed the entire Arab region. And that's just one country. So what I want to say is that we can solve the education problem. There has to be an alliance between farmers, the governments, private sector, and donors. We have donors, we have individuals, we have companies, governments, and like us, humanitarian institutions. So if there is such an alliance and we leverage and capitalize on all of the farmlands in the Arab region, I can guarantee you that this world will face no hunger and famine. I would like to suggest something, and this is your job here. I'll switch into English.
If we can have a declaration, a UN declaration, or the United Nations working with international countries, with the international community, and these countries, they go back to their Ministry of Agriculture or whatever ministry is in charge of farming, and if we can have a commitment of X percentage of whatever comes out from any farm in the world has to go to the development world. If you can work on that, that will be the start of ending hunger. That's how I think about it. Because you will have a sustained approach. Today it's 5% utilization, tomorrow it's 10, in 5 years it will be 20, and the number will go up. Please look into this, Majid.
Okay. So I'm going to take that question, but from now I'm going to wear my Kenyan hat as an African, because I think he was very specific about Africa and the rivers.
Okay, please do.
Because I think we'd be doing him a disservice by not addressing the fact that he did address the continent.
Yes.
Right? It's back to education, but it's also a culture shift of giving or receiving aid. It's a culture shift of the politicians realizing that they're not going to keep making money from the aid that's coming in or from importing food. I'll give you a very good example. Nigeria, the most populous country in the continent, imports the most rice in the continent, yet they produce their own rice and then they export it. I'll give you another example, the Ivory Coast example of cocoa.
Yes.
We've heard the examples of the cashew nuts being exported out of the continent and then brought back and sold to us at Carrefour and other supermarkets at exorbitant prices. So it's about changing that whole culture shift. You've got farmers that have produce going rotten in the farms, yet our supermarkets are stocked with imported goods. That culture shift of saying we now need to start consuming local. Foods that have been grown locally, manufactured locally, because think about the ripple effect of that. If you produce local, if you're canning or processing locally, you're creating opportunities for employment, and we're buying local, that money stays within that economy as opposed to importing goods. So for me, it's more than just a declaration, because then we're still going back to relying on somebody else. It starts with the continent. It starts with the people within the continent themselves. It starts with our leadership.
Great. Okay, another question? The lady here, please. Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Peace be upon you all. My name is Yasmin Arrawi.
developer. I am so much interested about the poor and rich. And it's been for me a study about the mentality of rich people, wealthy people, and about the poverty and how they think. So while my research is going on, there is a huge science called the mentality of rich people, wealthy people, and another mentality of the poverty, which actually make us sad, as you both, all of us agreed that we have a very wealthy countries in all قارات العالم.
احكي عربي عادي بس اختصري وطيني
Okay.
السؤال.
So when we will start publishing, developing this mentality in our educational system, that as a youth, we are educated to get jobs, but suddenly there's no job. When our education system will focus in empowering our mentality to think like wealthy people, like look at our asset as a human and our countries and develop that. This is what I see like we need. What do you think?
Okay. You want Mr. Abdul Majid to answer?
All of them are
Can I
sufficient.
take this again because it's related to education?
Okay, it's related to you.
Can I?
Yes,
Yeah? أتكلم بالعربي ولا إنجليزي؟ أتكلم هندي بعد إذا تبين عادي يعني.
تعرف هندي؟
حضرتك من وين؟ عراقية والنعم. I'll speak in English.
Speaking English.
There's a huge problem in the world, and I agree with you 100%. And Esther also mentioned earlier about mindset shift or mindset change. And what we have to do today in the education system, first, let us revamp our education system that we have globally, in developed and in developing countries. We are using exactly the same systems that we have been using for the past 40, 50, and 60 years. That's what's been happening. And so this is one. Two, we have another problem today, which is the youth. We have a huge issue with the youth. Youth are neglected. Youth don't have access to jobs. Youth who are in crisis are not being given any education or opportunity to have jobs. And another issue is being created on that level, which is tapping into something similar on what you're saying. And it has been annoying us as the education sector globally. It's been annoying us. And I've been in this sector for the past 10 years. And I'm trying to find a solution as a philanthropic organization to solve the problem. But me, and like any other agency, whether it's UNICEF, UNESCO, or any other donor, Save the Children, or Plan International, it's very hard to get a solution to education. But we're trying our level best. But what I want to shed light now is the positive side of it. Education has taken a global presence. Education has global attention right now. What we're doing now as the education sector from some of the organizations that I've mentioned and others as well, and even donors, there's a huge wave of assistance coming. We are looking, and when I say we, I am part of the global education change that is happening on a UN level and international level. We are looking into a big paradigm shift when it comes to curricula, pedagogy, skills, jobs, and youth. We are linking all of this together. Of course, funding will always be an issue.
In which areas you're progressing in shifting the paradigm?
This is the issue. Youth and skills, if you don't give them what they need, what you have to give them today, you're talking about a future of humanity that the youth of today, we never gave an opportunity, and tomorrow they will be 40 years old, they won't be able to solve any issue in the world.
Yes.
That's why the youth of today, we have to give them. My thing to you is we are working hard, and you will be seeing very soon, and I just want to end by saying we, Dubai Cares, and the UAE government with UNICEF, UNESCO, and UN Special Envoy for Global Education, Gordon Brown, and Global Partnership for Education, GPE, are going to announce, hopefully next week, if it's not next week, the week after, the biggest global education summit, and it will be in 2021 in Expo in March 17 to 19. We will be talking about all these issues. We're going to set track on what's going to happen to education from 2021 for the next 10 years to 2030, and I guarantee you, and I will tell you that we will put solutions and we will be following up on all these issues until 2030.
Great. I have last question, please.
I'll give you my card as soon as I leave.
Okay, we have last question from the lady here.
السلام عليكم
عليكم
جميعا
السلام.
وشكرا لكم على مداخلتكم.
Thank you and peace be with you. It's your intervention has been quite rich and really alleviated our sense of pressing issue of poverty. As we have said, poverty is connected to hunger, and hunger is related to education, and education is connected to economy, and economy is related to politics. Can we say that there are external foreign political forces that deprive these people from reaching a level of food security and keep them in hunger? How can we face this financial corruption and political corruption and all aspect of corruption? I'm sorry, but I believe this session has absolutely nothing to do with politics. Actually, one of the speakers, please allow me, if you don't mind. Please. We are in a cultural session, a panel discussion, and everything is available. Actually, the topic may be different. We are talking about record numbers. It is a shame to talk about this number in the year 2019 with all the technological advancement that we have, with globalization. And this rise in poverty is really, does not really give any sort of balance. So the same, I heard that 9 billion, I cannot even imagine this figure. I cannot get it into my mind. Those 9 billion, how can we see them? How can we deal with 9 billion? Now we see that the poor, who are under the red line of poverty and hunger, and we see that people of determination compose a very important segment of this. And thank you. Politics in our life, politics enters everywhere and in any subject.
About it. Who want to talk about it? ما عندك مشكلة. Is there any politicians, for example, or any forces in the world, they intervene and make it worse?
Let's just tie it down to, when I brought that up, I was talking to the cultural shift.
Yes.
Because I think we have, I'm just going to generalize, there's the notion that anything or goods that are imported are better.
Yes.
And we need to get away from that shift. So getting away from the political angle, we just need, it's a cultural shift of local, and that was actually where I was getting to, local for local. So local production for the local population.
Yes. Thank you.
أنا بس مداخلة بسيطة جدا يعني.
Let's have a brief intervention actually. So I studied business management, business administration, and I worked in the same bank for 12 years. And 10 years ago, I've been managing Dubai case. I'm not into politics, but I want to understand politics. Since we don't have really much time, I would have involved the UN scope, but I will assist you, Abdul Majid, and then we'll meet later. Anyway, we frequently read in the news and books that there are campaigns and that they want to obliterate the poor and that the planet is... There are many stories that we have and there are many YouTubes in this regard. But as a human being, I'm talking to you. I will remove all the hats that I have and speak to you from the perspective of a human being working in the fields of humanitarian aid. Is it logical that we want unemployment and poverty to prevail among millions of people, and we want to reduce the number of the population, total population of Earth? Is it really possible that we want to do that and to spend trillions of dollars? This is unbelievable. We are spending a lot of money to help them. How can you imagine we want to kill them? If we want to kill them, we can easily stop the aid and that's it. Let them die. But of course, this does not make sense. The concept that there is a global trend to obliterate the poor doesn't make any sense, because some rich countries dedicate billions of dollars to help the poor and the needy. So as a human being, this is unacceptable for me, and this doesn't make sense. So I'm not representing any government, I'm speaking as a global citizen. Before we conclude, I have a brief comment. I believe that intellectual poverty, if it is utilized by any force, it will be the strongest weapon, and not poverty in terms of food. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the panelists. Thank you very much.
and the humanitarian work you're doing. I'm very happy to meet you today, and I want to thank you, because we finished. I want to thank quickly our audience. Thank you very much.
Shukran. Yeah, thank you.